Welcome to Real Estate Talk. We're tackling your questions about real estate. Courtney, today's question is, what should I know before negotiating an offer on a home?
Well, I mean, the ideal scenario is you make the offer, the seller accepts it, there's no back and forth, and the home will be yours and you're done. But, what's your take there?
Yeah, that sounds like a dream come true. Actually, I kind of like the negotiation part. You can always expect that that's going to happen.
Definitely.
But by the way, if it happens the way that you described it too, that would be totally fine.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not always that easy. It's likely the seller will submit a counteroffer, and that's when you start to negotiate. And how much you can negotiate really depends on local market conditions.
Yeah.
And so in a buyer's market, how much can you negotiate? Well, that just means that there are more homes for sale than there are buyers for those homes. And so this gives buyers an upper hand, really. If there's an increase in supply or a surplus of supply, that means you're starting to feel the balance shift over to the buyer there, where sellers might consider something as low as, let's say, 10% lower than the asking price or the listing price of a home. So you can try negotiating different things like seller paid closing costs, the closing date, if you want to work on the timing aspect of things, and other contingencies like the inspections, where maybe it's not just the general home inspection, but it's a few other ones too. You can negotiate these. You could expect a little back and forth, and that's fine. But what we don't always recommend, Courtney, is just straight up lowball offers, which is, well, they seem desperate. I'm just going to offer, depending on the price point, let's say it's $500,000. I'm going to offer $300,000 just to see if they're super desperate.
Yeah.
Now, that could just insult the seller if you are actually interested in that property, and then you're sort of starting off on a bad foot to say, we're so far apart, and you don't seem like you're very serious, and this isn't starting well.
Absolutely. It makes me think negotiations actually begin even before you make the offer. And so, hey, if you want to make a lowball offer, do it. But, be mindful of what that is telling the seller even before they know you as the buyer.
Yeah. Sometimes the strategy is best foot forward, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, again, every situation is different. Time on the market is another thing that we haven't talked about yet, which is, has the home been sitting for a little while on the market, to see if that's going to also give you more confidence to write a lower offer, because that's really what the market is dictating at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Out there in Cleveland, Joe, is it more of a buyer's market right now?
It's definitely starting to shift that way. I still feel like if you say a metro like Cleveland, and this is true of any American city, there's even nuance within that market, right?
Yes.
Where I could say that, some cities are seeing multiple offers at an open house. There's still a line out the door on a Sunday. In some places where you're really starting to see inventory increase, the market's still moving though, for sure, but it does feel different than it has over the last few years.
Oh, same here in Houston. Just like Joe said, there's pockets everywhere, right? Even within a metro area. But if it's a seller's market, how much can you negotiate? Well, a seller's market is when there are more home buyers available than homes. And in a seller's market, you won't have as much negotiating power as a buyer. Joe said that at the top of the episode, where, you might be in these competitive offer situations. And so you do have to put your best foot forward if you want the home. Standard contingencies in a seller's market, like home inspection, appraisal, financing, are likely acceptable. But if it's a competitive offer situation, you're competing against other buyers, then you may either waive or shorten those contingencies. You need to make an offer that's easy to understand. And in a seller's market especially, it may mean that you have to limit your requests when it comes to negotiating, but really your real estate agent's going to be able to advise you on what are they seeing in that particular area and what will help you win the deal. Now, what about a balanced market? Are there similarities or differences, Joe? Like, what does a balanced market look like, and what kind of negotiating power does a buyer have?
Yeah, I think that just means that there's like you said, a really good balance of buyers and sellers too. So sellers can take their time in reviewing offers that come in, or if an offer comes in, there could be several rounds of negotiation. I feel like the time element is just relieved a little bit more, where you can really just take the time to decide on both the buy and sell side what the strategy is going to be. And as a buyer, you can probably start with an offer that's a little bit lower than asking price and include contingencies that other buyers would be doing the same. And the seller knows that, especially if they're working with a listing agent, those inspections that are pretty normal to a purchase. So with what Courtney described in a seller's market is waiving a lot of contingencies, and a balanced on the way to a buyer's market, you might see more of them. So even though there's less urgency in a balanced market, we don't recommend dragging your feet too long. One of the things I always look for in a client, and they look for in me, is responsiveness. Where the one thing you want to keep going is just the conversation about what's happening in the moment. Because if you submit an offer, for example, even in a balanced market, and the seller does get back to you within 12, 24 hours, and then we can't reach you as a customer, or the seller can't reach the buyer. And then now we're in day 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, again, that's back to setting the tone early in a negotiation. They're probably feeling like you're not as serious about it, or they're not actively engaged in the conversation about selling the home, and starts getting maybe things off on the wrong setting, versus just staying, even if it is, I'm going to take a day to think about it, perfectly acceptable response, but make sure you're available to have that conversation.
For sure. When you said responsiveness, I immediately thought, like, as a broker or agent, like, responsiveness is key in our business. But you're right. The buyer actually needs to be responsive as well, because somebody could swoop right in there, especially if it's a balanced market or a seller's market, to just get ahead of you if you haven't responded quickly. Yeah,
think about it this way, Courtney, too. It's like you took the time and to write an offer on a home, which is a big deal. Like, you want that property and you want to win that deal, of course, at the terms that you want. But like you said, there are other people that are probably looking for the same thing too, and possibly even at lower prices if we don't get right on it and submit a counteroffer or response to the seller.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about a few things that you can negotiate when purchasing a home. I'll start, and Joe, you and I will go back and forth and tag team these things. The big one here is you can negotiate the purchase price, okay? You can offer a price that's lower than the list price. The best strategy is really to include a pre-approval letter or proof of funds with that offer. And if you are offering less than the listing price, make sure that that pre-approval letter aligns with what you're offering, so that you're not showing your hand that you could actually pay more. What's the second one, Joe?
Mortgage points. So we did a video about this a little while back, and mortgage points will basically reduce the buyer's mortgage interest rate and monthly mortgage payments, which, again, talking about this current market, is really one of the things that's on the forefront of buyers' minds right now, is that interest rate. So as the market starts to shift towards buyers, you could ask the seller to pay that rate down, and it could benefit the seller too, because mortgage points qualify as a tax deductible expense.
Exactly.
And so we could be looking at a little bit of a win-win here. Even if one of those other terms increases, maybe it's more meaningful for you to pay that down.
For sure, for sure. Buyer can also negotiate closing costs. So closing costs are the fees you pay to finalize a real estate transaction. We've talked about this in past episodes. They usually range from 2 to 5% of the purchase price. You could ask the seller to pay some or all of your closing costs as part of your offer or counteroffer when negotiating.
I love this next one, Courtney, because it's not always talked about in the way that it can be meaningful to a seller, which is timing. I used to just tell clients price, terms, and timing. And the reason I love it is because it really just takes asking the questions to the listing agent or seller about what their ideal timing is. And if you take the time to listen, if it's not already in the advertising or in previous conversations, where maybe they have a situation where they want to close on the deal but rent back, maybe they're really looking for time to find a house themselves, you can actually just find out about that and cater the offer to that. Or if you, again, going back to a buyer's market, if you're really strict on timing, that pendulum starts to swing your way and you're more in control over timing. But it's a really good negotiation tool.
For sure. And it doesn't cost the buyer any money, technically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Next thing, we can negotiate a home warranty. If you're concerned about the overall condition of a home, but you really want the home and you just want this like extra insurance, if you will, a home warranty is an insurance plan that covers the home's major systems for up to 1 year. Obviously, you can renew it as you see fit. Typical home warranty costs between $600 and $3,000 per year, and it will cover most appliances, HVAC, plumbing, electrical systems. Huge caveat, please read the fine print if you are looking into a home warranty. Okay, again, it is an insurance plan, so read that fine print. A buyer can negotiate and ask the seller to purchase a home warranty. And it's just kind of nice, especially if you're new to home ownership, just to have that peace of mind and have a company that you can call, pay a really small deductible, and they come out and make the repairs is something that you can negotiate. What's the next one, Joe?
We're both smiling too because there are good home warranty companies and there are not so good home warranty companies.
Read the Google reviews, guys.
Yeah, good point. So the next one's household items, fixtures, furnishings. Fixtures are included with the property. So that's anything that's affixed to the property. I always give the example of the chandelier that's hanging over the dining room table is affixed to the ceiling there. That is included. Sometimes sellers take the additional step of just making sure that they include fixtures anyway in the property description because maybe it's like very noticeable, like that really nice chandelier, and it's like, this is included. So the property description can include other things too, including non-fixtures like personal property. Courtney, how many times have you toured with a buyer where maybe they had like a really good decorator or just really good taste, and like that furniture matches that living room or kitchen. And so, some buyers, again, depending on what's going on in the market, will ask for those things to be included because either they don't have those things or they just really want them to be included in the purchase. So that's what we talk about when it's household items, fixtures, furnishings.
And don't forget, we never assume in real estate, okay? So if there's a piece, you're buying a home, if there's some sort of piece, even if it's affixed to the property, double check with your agent because there are times where there are some exclusions that are listed on the MLS and we don't want to miss that accidentally either.
Yeah, kitchen appliances are probably the biggest one that come up too, where all of a sudden you'll go through a final walkthrough or hopefully not, just actually close on the property and walk in and the refrigerator that you thought was going to be there is no longer there.
For sure. It's all got to go in the contract. You can also negotiate updates or repairs. Now, keep in mind, if you're asking a seller to complete repairs, typically the seller is going to use whatever contractor, whatever materials. So you definitely want to get with your agent on what things they would recommend that you negotiate in terms of repairs or updates, but it's definitely a negotiating tool. Joe, do you have any pro tips or words of wisdom that you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, I want to add the negotiation over the real estate agent's fees, where you can ask the seller to pay, if you're a buyer, to ask the seller to pay the amount that would cover that amount that you've agreed to with your buyer's agent. So basically to cover that fee or a portion of that fee. That's another negotiation that can take place in this transaction.
Absolutely. It should take place. That's actually probably should have been number one over the purchase price. But hey, I'm glad you added that, Joe. We'll be back with another episode with tips to help you navigate the world of real estate. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions about what we covered today or future topics that you'd like us to cover. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. We've got a lot of great stuff in store for you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.